Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Tatiana Kluvankova. I'm chair of this session. And I welcome everyone on this session, which is a session organized and co-hosted by Horizon 2020 project Simra. Project Simra has ended last year. The project has focused on the social innovation in rural marginalized areas. And this session is to discuss the role of social innovations to promote transformation for the green recovery and carbon neutral Europe. So everybody is welcome at this session, and we are pleased that we can spend this time with you. So, I mean, social and digital innovations to promote transformation for green recovery and carbon neutral Europe. That's the topic of the session. Social innovation. So that's the area that has been quite discussed in policy and academic areas, and done numerous interpretation what the term means. Some of them are normative, some of them are theoretical. But in principle, we can agree that social innovations refer to novel social practice that can improve social needs. There are a number of definitions you can copy, but in principle, this is what the social innovation are supposed to do. In rural setting, Simra project develop own definition of social innovation, and the social innovation is seen as a reconfiguration process that is reconfiguring social practice, and this is the response to societal challenges like climate change, different global aspects, but also local needs. And this is supposed to seek and enhance outcomes on societal well-being. That's very important in understanding social innovations in rural areas, that they have some target, and this target is well-being. And also this necessarily includes engagement of civil society actors. So there are 4 key points: reconfiguration, societal challenges, well-being, and civil society actors. Then digital innovations, which are also very now emerging in the process of rural development. And for sure, this is kind of digitalization and the use of digital technology to improve social practice. Then digital innovation is seen to foster reconfiguration of social practice and hence social innovation development. So you may see on the pictures how different social innovations can be supported by digitalization. So this is how we like to see that. And then this session is supposed to address 2 questions. Can social and digital innovation foster sustainability transformation across the scales? And to what extent and under what circumstances can social and digital innovation deliver transformative opportunities to people on the ground and to steer green recovery and carbon neutral development? These are our questions of the session, and now we have 2 important speakers that will address this issue. It's a Professor Maria Nijnik and Dr. Leanne Townsend. Both are by accident working at the same institute, which is the Hutton Institute in Scotland. And Maria has coordinated Project Simra, and Leanne is coordinating Project DESIRA. These 2 projects are targeting on social and digital innovations in rural areas. I'd like to shortly introduce both. Maria is principal scientist at James Hutton Institute. She's been primarily focusing on forest and forest governance. She's been a member of UK Government Expert Committee on Forest Science and UFRO office holder. And she's awardee of the International Union of Forest Research Organization and Scientific Achievement Awards in 2019. And she's been part of the expert bodies, a number of expert bodies and scientific advisory boards of the European Forest Institute, EURAC, and she was coordinating Project Simra. And Leanne is a senior scientist at Hutton, also social scientist, and she has developed and led research on social impact on new technologies for diverse groups and creative industries, gypsy travelers, communities, and different type of stakeholders. She's currently researching the impact of digitalization, and she's on rural areas and rural communities, and she's chair of the DESIRA project. That is the project focusing on the digitalization in small smart farms. So this is for our keynote speakers, and this is a very short kind of link to the both projects that are behind this session. The both are located in rural context. Simra was more focusing on the understanding social innovations, and DESIRA is on impact of the digitalization. Very short introduction to Simra project that has lasted for 4 years, and the numerous achievements in these projects, a number of publications that you may see and a link on the website of the project. In principle, there was a number of theoretical and conceptual work has been completed in the project on defining, conceptualizing, and categorizing social innovations. And then there was a large set of empirical data collected and evaluated that are now providing evidence on diversity, success factors, and challenges and barriers of social innovations in rural areas. Then DESIRA project is on digitalization and economic and social impact in rural areas. And you will see that there has been a new digital technologies and game changers are kind of studied how this can reconfigure social practice. And there is a comprehensive assessment of opportunities and threats that has been considered in the project. And again, there is a quite large empirical evidence from a living lab in 21 countries. So this is about the projects. I believe the both speakers will later say more. And now I like to lead the word to first speaker, which is Maria Nijnik, and her talk on social innovations. Maria, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tatiana. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now. Yeah. So good morning. Thank you, Tatiana, for introducing me and for inviting me to take part in this plenary session and this conference, international conference. We live in turbulent times, and these challenges that we face, we can consider by looking at 3 well-known dimensions of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social. These dimensions are interlinked, and they should be well balanced for the whole social, economic, and environmental system to develop towards sustainability and for the pathways to be green. Much depends on the right policies and government intervention and various bottom-up movements. Here they are shown in red. With dirty pathways, 230 gigatons of CO2 could still enter the atmosphere by 2050, despite all the efforts. And this may have very severe consequences. We currently already observed, in addition to climate change, biodiversity losses, and the COVID pandemic. Let's look at economic component. If economic growth goes beyond the limits, this could lead to resource scarcity, concentration of power and resources, problems with globalization of various kinds, problems of resource depletion, natural capital degradation, pollution, and various negative externalities can then be observed concerning the environment. Improper interaction of environmental and social components of sustainability could provoke various hazards, diseases like COVID, and waste-related problems, etc. And societal problems could include fuel poverty, marginalization of certain communities and groups of people. They concern human health, human well-being. So all these challenges associated with disbalance in the interaction of these components and these challenges of economic, social, and environmental matters go across scales, and they can observe at a local level as well as globally. So what shall we do? Are we supposed to be carrying on with the structure, mental structure in mind as we currently have, and perhaps to go beyond limits substantially? Or we need the green recovery, and the green recovery brings in arguments that rather than restore what was before the pandemic and before the crisis we are currently observing, to transform the course of action towards a long-term sustainability in living with nature and governing nature. Biodiversity conservation and climate neutrality interacts with human prosperity. It's obvious, and it is crucial to enhance the resilience, sustainability, circularity, inclusiveness of social and ecological system, and make these interrelationships work sustainably. We need to reverse course on degradation of nature and promote green, digital, healthy, wealthier, more prosperous development for all. These strategic tasks require behavioral changes on the ground, but are we committed and motivated? Do we have adequate capabilities and resources? Can COVID be a trigger and a catalyst to steer sustainability transformations? Indeed, COVID has multiplied the need for behavioral changes. It interconnects all these components of sustainability and its building blocks. And it argues for immediate and adequate societal responses, for these responses to be strategic by nature, but with actions to be taken at a local level. Outcomes for the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030 look dire without transformation action. The UN identified 3 priorities to build back better: to maintain progress towards eradication basic deprivations, accelerate universal provision of quality essential services, and reverse course on degradation of nature. How social innovation can contribute to achieving the goals? Can social innovation promote sustainability transformation? Indeed, social innovation opens new prospects to foster positive changes. This talk is about the power of social innovation, with a primary focus, as Tatiana told, on marginalized rural areas and marginalized communities. What is currently observed in marginalized rural areas? We see, of course, depopulation, out-migration, population drift from small villages to larger villages and towns. This leads to closure of services, health services, transport services. This threatens capacity for endogenous advance in some areas, and at the same time, we can see some opportunities that we may benefit from. We see diversification. For instance, forestry is becoming more and more multifunctional, post-productive. We see restructuring, agriculture and forestry coming together, which we see development of new activities, new services, new business models. We see changing infrastructure, not only concerning roads and transport system and energy networks, but also digitalization. The next speaker will tell you about, but also changing lifestyles. We become more flexible. We can have such a great conference of many participants online, and it gives us benefits. We can work remotely. We can have more free time to enjoy nature. But along with looking for how we can benefit from the opportunities arising, we need to tackle challenges and to respond to challenges. There are various ways to respond to challenges. We can support small businesses, new business models, local short supply food chain, circular bioeconomy is becoming popular, infrastructure and service development. We exploit green spaces, valorize ecosystem services, trying to internalize externalities. We, in some areas, can use fiscal incentives, but more and more intensively, new collaborative actions are coming up on the agenda, and these are social innovations. What is social innovation about? It's about quality of life and human well-being. It's about new social relationships and collaboration, innovative governance, social cohesion, justice, sustainable, smart, and inclusive growth. Tatiana has introduced the definition of social innovation developed by Simra. In short, it's doing things for people and doing things with people. It's about products, ideas, services, arrangements, relationships, but also about processes, interactions, activities, various fields of activities, new processes to meet social needs. Indeed, social innovation opens new opportunities and responds to pressing social demands. And most importantly is that it does it in places and for people who need it most. So in places that traditionally are not covered, for instance, by public policy due to shortage of financing, or not traditionally addressed by existing institutions like markets, for instance, for public goods where markets cannot work properly. Simra has improved understanding of social innovation, its potential for transformative changes, how it can revive communities and bring prosperity to marginalized rural areas, how it can be initiated, how it can be developed, spread, how its impact can be assessed, how to build capacities and develop collaborations to enhance social innovation and promote sustainability transformations. Simra database of examples was incredibly extensive and really unique. It covers 450 very different examples of social innovations with 243 validated examples, 30 of which belong to rural Scotland. We also worked in 24 case studies and 7 innovation actions. We work, as Tatiana told, about our work concern rural development, agriculture, forestry. The primary focus was on the Mediterranean area, but not only. We worked also with people in Northeast Africa, and distribution of social innovation examples is presented in this graph, and you can see that the examples are quite diverse. The Green Deal strengthens the necessity for climate neutrality, for greening of the agricultural policy, for preserving protection of biodiversity, and maintaining sustainability in all EU policies and also at national level. Each aim of the Green Deal, with an example of social innovation from Simra, can be seen, is presented in our brochures and also online. The link, you can see our outputs provided by Tatiana. I will remind you about them. And also in our numerous publications, for instance, you can read about climate neutral Europe, carbon smart forestry due to a self-organized forest commons regimes in Slovakia, or about supplying clean, affordable, and secure energy, electric, sustainable resources to connect communities in the UK. One of the examples is of social innovation is an example of new developments in the Braemar community. It's a village of 400 people, most remote in DESIRA and part of the Cairngorm National Park in Scotland. It's often cut off by bad weather. It has poor public services. I mean, poor for the UK conditions. It has grid connection problems, energy poverty, again for this country, earlier population decline. It has a need to retain young people and to provide opportunities which are not pursued by public and private sector. So what have they done? They established a community development trust to oversee projects through feasibility studies and advising. They exploited strong social capital, a mix of local people and newcomers to create a vibrant community willing to innovate. Its social enterprise is nurtured by the community development trust and then becomes independent. The projects they have initiated develop quite diverse. For instance, the footbridge helped create circular walks around the village, and the restoration of crop settlement provides another point of interest. All this together with visitor attraction help make Braemar a more attractive place for visitors and for residents. The hydro plant was then developed as a community cooperative, and it has 200 shareholders now. Who crowdfunded the scheme initially, and the Prince of Wales formally opened the scheme. The shareholders will get a good return on their investment. A community benefit fund will generate about $500,000 for the community over the life of the scheme. The Braemar locally owned and managed social enterprise is meant to replace existing care system for elderly people. Care workers were wasting time in long journeys to work and were coming and inconvenient times for elderly people, or sometimes not at all during bad weather. So local women are the brains behind a scheme, and they created a social enterprise and provided additional jobs in the village, and then elderly people have more care in the right time and more in a more friendly way. And they also helped with the shopping and gardening. And Braemar Development Trust provides advice and support until the projects are off the ground. And then when they up and running, this project usually become freestanding entities, and then they don't need so much of support from the trustees and from experts. The same, or very similar, is the Lochcarron example. They also created community healthcare system. And now they cover, this system also covers people from nearby villages. They have a place to meet people. They have library. They created a new bus service to Inverness, because before that they had to commute for the near medical service for 2 hours. This reduces isolation, provides health and will improves health and well-being of people, and provides employment opportunities. But of course, challenges exist, and for instance, to secure funds is an important issue. Another example is the current Community Development Trust idea. This community trust is a community organization which was before that called Kirkton Woodland Heritage Group, and they also have various projects. And the community also acquired a previously owned state forest, and they diversify the activities and make forest really multifunctional. And their aim is to manage community land and associated assets for the benefit of the community and the public, to advance education of the community about environment, culture, and history, and to advance arts, heritage, culture, and science, wider going beyond the community. So what makes success happen? Dedicated volunteers with their vision and with their networks and support. Skills, for instance, skills of the community development officer in Lochkaran. Seed and matched funding is crucial. Alternative business models and new ideas to come up, very important. And these new opportunities we can also see on another example, a third example and final one in Aberdeenshire. It's innovation action arising from integrating or from the refugees coming to our country. And the Amal project is the project focused on socially integrated Syrian refugees, but now we will have, of course, more of refugees welcomed to this country. They have two projects within this Amal wider project. They have two social innovations. A kitchen, it means that at the community center, Syrian refugees can cook Arabic and provide food for newly arriving immigrants and for local Scottish community. And the garden project, a place for the refugees to mix with locals at an allotment to practice English. And it promotes volunteering, building the new Scots confidence in applying for work in future, and it provides many other benefits, mutual benefits, or for all the members of the community. What else underpins or under which circumstances this section is one of the questions of this section is under which circumstances can transformative opportunities arise and be implemented. We need to be creative, to be motivated. This lies at the heart. Then niche development important. Well-designed policy and supportive governance can develop niche for trials and pilots. Then these pilots can upscale with best solutions, upscale, and this promotes the transition towards sustainability and a better future for the people. Multi-level policy interventions can strengthen social innovation. Strong social capital is crucial. It contributes positively to the emergence, development, and spreading of social innovation, scaling out, scaling up, and replicating. Co-learning is important. It's a core of social innovation with local actors sharing experiences between places and at national and international levels, and also with scientists, policy actors, businesses, and empowering actors, fostering collaborative working and developing and strengthening new partnerships. So social innovation, of course, can advance sustainability and help reduce marginalization, but it is important to design the ways of how to promote the initiation and development of social innovation. how to strengthen local self-government and support actors for social innovation, then to sustain in time and space and spread, to give case and context consideration of enablers, enabling factors and barriers of social innovation, and also the actors who enable social innovation and make it happen. Given the priority of policy objectives to steer green recovery and carbon neutrality, the following research questions, I think, merit further attention. How does social innovation fit into systems approach of developing and operationalizing of bioeconomy? How to empower social innovative actors to develop solutions to climate and environmental challenges? What models of social innovation are most effective for improving mental health and human well-being? What are the perceptions and motivations of social innovation actions while initiating and sustaining of their projects? Countries, of course, are very different, and there are different stages in developing policy support structures for social innovation. And it is important to find solutions where the policy architecture for social innovation is less developed and civil society capacity is weak, and therefore educational courses, knowledge sharing is seen as a way forward. Thank you very much. That's all of my talk, and here if you would like to ask me further questions, you can also email, and I'm grateful to participants in local case studies, all Simra colleagues and partners, and thank you for support for this coming from the Scottish government for this project in Scotland, and for the European Commission for supporting the Simra project. Thank you for your attention once again.
Thank you very much, Maria, for excellent talk. For sure we have a time for questions, but I'm suggesting that we keep our questions after second presentation. Then we can have a joint discussion for the both panelists. Then I would like to call now Leanne to give a talk.
Hi, Tatiana.
Yes, floor is yours.
Great, so there's the presentation. Okay, Tatiana, thank you so much for inviting me to give a presentation today in your conference. I'm going to be talking about the DESIRA project, which you already introduced, and I'm going to focus on our case study in Scotland, where we're working with crofting communities. I just have to say that I'm not actually the coordinator of DESIRA. DESIRA, the project overall is coordinated by Gianluca Brunori, who's based in Pisa, but I am the lead at the Hutton Institute, and we also lead a work package. So yeah. So if we could move to the first slide, that would be great. Okay, so I thought I would start off by introducing a little bit of context, which is relevant for rural Scotland and is characteristics that we know are common across much of rural Europe. This is very much reinforcing some of the points that Maria has already made this morning. So in our rural areas, we see increasingly aging populations. And particularly in the more remote regions, those populations are obviously much smaller and more widely dispersed than we would find in more urban areas or even more connected rural areas. Youth outmigration is a big problem as young people move to more urban areas to pursue job opportunities and also housing opportunities, which are becoming more difficult in rural areas. And this is something that I will speak about a little bit more later on. Remoteness is obviously an issue, and this presents problems of accessibility, particularly to key services such as transport and healthcare and sometimes education and so on. We know that businesses are isolated from one another in these places sometimes, but also from their potential markets and other businesses that they might work with further afield. An increasingly problematic challenge is that of weak communications infrastructure. By this, I really mean internet connectivity, which although it has improved in our rural areas in Scotland and across Europe, it still proves to be a problem for those located in rural areas. So we know that there is this promise that digital tools and technologies can solve all of the problems like some kind of magic bullet for rural areas. However, first of all, we have to consider that access to those digital tools and technologies themselves through internet connectivity is itself one of the challenges of rural areas, and it is creating further marginalization in some cases. So there is a positive and a more dark side to this promise. So we could move to the next slide. So what is this promise of rural digitalization then? Well, the idea is that digital tools and technologies can bring with them a number of opportunities for these rural areas that might help them to overcome some of the challenges that they face. So these include digital being able to promote different types of innovation, social innovation, economic innovation, to allow businesses in those areas to grow, and of course for communities and businesses to expand their networks, often using online platforms, and through so doing to form new collaborations and to reach new markets and so on. However, because there are a number of digital challenges also in rural areas, we have to question how much this promise can actually hold true. So challenges include, as I've already mentioned, access to tools and technologies, particularly through internet connectivity, and also people in rural areas generally having a lower level of awareness of what's out there and what might be able to help them, what digital tools they could use. Digital skills tend to be lower in rural areas in comparison with urban areas. And this can be, to some extent, put together with the fact that we're dealing with more aging populations. And levels of adoption of various different tools and technologies, even where access is not a problem, is lower. So what we find then is that depending upon who you are, and where you are located in a rural area, you could either be a winner or a loser in this increasingly digital society if you're located in a rural area. So we could move to the next slide. So there's been a lot of research and funding in recent years, especially through Horizon 2020, and we see this priority being maintained in Horizon Europe program on how we can promote digital opportunities and, importantly, how we can prevent these kinds of further marginalization that comes from this unequal or what we might call the digital divide. So research on digitalization in agroforestry sector in particular stresses an approach which is called responsible research and innovation, or RRI, as a possible solution and as a kind of good practice in your research and development. So what is RRI? It's a scientific research and technological development process that acknowledges the effects and the potential impacts on the environment and society going beyond the market benefit and risk assessment. So really what this means is that when developers are developing technologies, they don't just think about how to make the most money, who they can sell the most technologies to, but rather they include the voices of all potential users so that those technologies become more inclusive across society. So we can move to the next slide. So I thought now I'd introduce our case study in DESIRA. In DESIRA, there are a number of living labs all over Europe working with different case studies. In Scotland, we're working with a crofting community. So you may think, what's a croft? A croft is a kind of small farm or small landholding with an average size of around 5 hectares. There are over 20,000 crofts registered in Scotland, and they tend to be most typical in the Highlands and Islands region. And that is because this is a region which is typically quite mountainous, and it's very difficult for other types of agriculture to take hold, especially arable, because of the mountains and the land. The main products of crofts tend to be beef and lamb. In the area we're working in, it's mostly sheep. And in the case of crofts, the farmer is usually the tenant. He's renting the land. And he also shares that land or access to that land with other crofters. And this is something called the common grazings, which is a historic approach to farming. So sheep from different crofts are grazing together on the same land. Crofting is really a very historical type of farming in Scotland. It's been around for centuries, and it's part of our cultural heritage. And it's protected by legal acts which have been in place since 1886. So crofting typically doesn't provide enough income to support a household or a family. So the majority of crofters are actually pluri-active, meaning that they have other jobs in the local community. Maybe they work in the post office or the school or the shop, or they've diversified their croft to other economic activities, such as agritourism. They may have a campsite or wooden cabins or something like this. They may use the wool from their sheep for crafts and other kinds of craft businesses. So, as well as crofting being about farming and sheep and cows, it's also deeply embedded in the landscape. Crofters have a very close relationship with the earth. They understand their local landscape, and in many cases, they're custodians and care deeply for that landscape. So they're really environmental actors as well as agricultural ones. And yeah, they also face a number of challenges, which we've already heard about from Maria and earlier from me, which are by now quite familiar for remote rural regions, including being in a remote area, problems of accessibility, an increasingly aging population, and of course, economies of scale for their products. So we can move to the next slide. So the crofting community that we're working with is in an area called Coyac, which is on the northwest coast of Scotland in the Ross and Cromarty region. You see it there on the map where all of the red tags are. And the main economic activities in this region are crofting, fishing, and tourism. It's a very widely spread population of around 228 people. And it's worth mentioning that in this community, there is also a community development company. It's called the Coyac Community Development Company, which supports a number of different initiatives and responds to the challenges that they face. And there is also a project called CALP, which stands for Coyac and Assynt Living Landscape Project. And this project is funded mostly by the Scottish Wildlife Trust, but also by a number of other funders. And in this project, they support the local people to develop, but also it's about supporting the sustainability of the local landscape, the wildlife. There are various projects, including woodland restoration, peatland restoration, as well as initiatives to support crofters to develop or to diversify. So it's really about supporting them to be a more resilient, sustainable community in the face of the challenges that they face. And this is also a conservation area, so it's really beautiful. And because of that, it attracts a lot of tourism. And this is both a good thing and perhaps not always a good thing, as I'll talk about a few slides on. So we could move on. Okay, yeah, so this is the CALP project. I already talked about that actually. So this is their website, and this is actually, they had a final conference. So this is an example of how digital was used to promote their activities. Wouldn't have been a digital or a virtual conference before COVID, but we'll talk more about that in the following slides. Okay. So how is digitalization relevant to crofting? I'll talk first about the more agricultural aspects, and then maybe we'll talk more about the other aspects of a wider crofting community. So smart farming technologies, as they're known, or SFTs, are argued by many to revolutionize agriculture. They can increase productivity, they increase yield, and they bring about huge cost savings for certain farmers. However, these farmers tend to be the very large farms. So going back to this idea of responsible research and innovation, basically the developers of these technologies are making very large scale, very expensive technologies, and they're targeting the large farms because the large farms have more money to invest in the technologies. they also have larger number of acres to see a return on those investments more quickly. I'm also involved in another Horizon 2020 project called AgriLink, where we looked at adoption of precision farming. And we found that those kinds of technologies are most likely to be adopted by the largest farms because the smaller farms just can't justify the expense and they wouldn't see the return on the investment. So how does this impact on crofts? Well, crofts, we know they're very small farms, and they also have very poor digital infrastructures in some of those areas. So they cannot afford the technologies are not designed to their scale, and they wouldn't be able to run them for a lack of broadband in some cases. So the question is then, how can crofters and other kinds of small farms actually benefit from smart farming technologies? But perhaps more importantly, what are the threats to crofters if they do not benefit, if they can't embrace this digital age? It's argued that advancing digitalization in agriculture, it allows and encourages large farms to get much larger. We see evidence of that in the AgriLink project, where farms are actually buying more land to justify the use of certain technologies. When large farms get larger, sometimes small farms get smaller, and in some cases are no longer viable at all. So they either diversify completely or they shut down. What about the other areas of impact for this wider crofting community? What about the community level and environmental impacts? This is something that I'm going to talk about in the following slides. So we can move on. Just briefly to talk a little bit about what the activities are that we're carrying out with our Living Lab. So far, with our crofting community. So far, we've done one introductory workshop in which we worked with that community to explore their journey, really, of digital technologies. You know, what is their recent history of digital development, and what's the current state of affairs of digital technologies and access in the community. Our next step, next month, we will do a scenario development workshop. Oops, yeah. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. We've also done an online survey and held some stakeholder interviews, and generally just spent time there talking to them, visiting their crofts and seeing what life is like for them there. We're also, that's okay, we're also developing a virtual reality platform called the DigiCroft. And the DigiCroft, it uses 3D filming and photography of a number of different crofts in the area. So it's based on those crofts. And it's a kind of virtual platform where they should be able to access a number of different training resources, including 3D filming or films of different aspects of crofting that might be useful to them. So we'll move on from that to the next slide. Just a brief word on how COVID has impacted on both our research and maybe a bit also on the local community as well. So this is a community that is not easy to reach digitally. Until fairly recently, they haven't really been very digital. They only very recently had managed to have broadband installed. And I should mention that that's probably what we might think of as an example of social innovation, because this initiative came from local citizens out of the community development company. So now they have broadband just in time for the first lockdown, which is just as well, because actually, as we know, everything in life moves online at this point. And, you know, it's enabling people to stay connected, especially those people that live far from the more central community. For our project, though, there was still a reluctance on most people's parts to do any kind of online workshops. You know, they still weren't used to using Zoom and other things. They would far rather meet in person. So really, for DESIRA, we had to just wait and wait until things began to return to normal. And we did our first workshop with them in May, and that was quite delayed. And now we see, despite spikes sometimes in the COVID rates, we now see normality slowly returning, and the option of having more workshops is returning to us. In terms of the impacts on the community themselves, there's been a number of interesting outcomes from this, and I'll give two examples in the following slides. But importantly, we've seen a gradual increase in digital skills as members of that community were really quite forced in a way to quickly learn how to use things like Zoom and social media platforms and WhatsApp as a way of staying in touch with one another, really, just as online communication really became the norm everywhere. So we can move to the next slide. So I just wanted to talk about our findings in terms of opportunities and also in terms of challenges. So what we've seen so far since they've had the broadband installed is lots of promising examples, such as our crofting community able to reach new markets for their products, whether that's their livestock, their sheep, or other products, diversified products such as crafts and other food products. An increase in tourism, which in some cases brings more money to the local community and the local economy, but we will look a bit more at the darker side of that in a couple of slides. It allowed them to form new networks and collaborations, and also to pursue their own personal and professional development. So we had crofters who had attended online courses and conferences during lockdowns, and they would normally have attended in person, only if they did have the time and the money to travel, though. So perhaps it's opened up new routes for these kinds of development. We've also seen that these online platforms have enabled the community to continue their communications and their different kinds of projects throughout lockdown, which is really important. An interesting finding for women in particular, or other childcare providers, is that meetings moving online has enabled them to participate when they may not have been able to participate face-to-face because of childcare duties. So this is quite an interesting finding. And also some cases of our community being able to access e-health resources for themselves, but also an interesting thing about accessing vet services. They actually live 1 hour from the nearest vet. So if an animal is very critically ill, this can be dangerous because an hour might be too long. And also the vet traveling for 1 hour is quite a lot of money as a call out charge. So using something like a WhatsApp video to have a first consultation with the vet, it can be quite useful. So if we go to the next slide. Right, I just wanted to give you an example of a really positive thing that's developed since digital has become more accessible. And this is a website called The Green Bowl. The Green Bowl is, it's using an open source platform called the Open Food Network, which is a global platform free to use anywhere in the world. And we see really interesting initiatives in developing countries and elsewhere with this platform. So what's been done here, it's a bit like an online farmers market. It's bringing together all of the produce of all of the local food producers. And that might be someone who grows vegetables on a commercial scale, or it might be someone with just a few spare jars of jam, or a few bunches of celery, or just one spare box of eggs. Everybody gets to put their products onto this one platform. As a customer, you would go here and make your purchases, and the money would then be distributed to the different producers. You go to a local cafe to pick it up. So it's a really nice example of using a digital platform to empower local food producers and also just the local community to enable them to access local food. I suppose it's an example of what Maria called a local short food supply chain. So we can move to the next example. In terms of digitalization challenges, we still see that across the community, not everybody has the same level of access. You know, some have really good broadband connectivity now, some people don't have any at all, and everything in between, depending on where you're located. And of course, for those without or with poor access, you know, or perhaps lower levels of digital skills, these people are going to be increasingly marginalized from all of those opportunities arising in that local environment. We've also seen examples of digital fatigue, where people are just fed up now of doing everything online and desire to return to face-to-face interaction. We talked about tourism, and of course, digital platforms do increase that because tourism can be promoted online, but also social media platforms tend to promote that local area. There can be a dark side to tourism, which is, for one thing, an increase in local land value where people build second homes as holiday homes, meaning a reduction in the amount of local housing for local people. And, you know, there are other impacts of excessive tourism. I will give you an example of that right now on the next slide. So this is a route called the NC 500, or the North Coast 500. It's an initiative created by kind of local tourists, company organizations and the local authorities and so on, to promote this part of the north of Scotland and to get people traveling around it and putting money into the local economy through tourism. So initially this seemed like a very good idea, but if you speak to people who live on this route, they have quite a different idea about this NC 500. Since COVID, less people are going on holidays abroad, more people are holidaying in the UK. This has created an explosion in the number of camper vans and caravans on the road. If you put this together with this social media trend, if you look at the picture in the bottom with the camper van and the fire pit, it all looks really romantic. And this is really a fashion on social media like Instagram now to sort of promote what they call #vanlife. And it increases how many people want to get involved with camper vans and travel around Scotland and see the beautiful points. So there are too many vehicles on these small roads, which are not designed for a lot of vehicles. The local authorities do not have the funding to fix the potholes in the roads that develop. But importantly, there are also impacts on the local landscape and environment. It's not good for the wildlife. You have sometimes responsible campers who give money to the local economy through restaurants and shops, and they are very careful, you know, with clearing up their rubbish and, you know, how they go to the toilet and things. But unfortunately, you also get those people who are less responsible, who do all of their food shopping in a big supermarket in Inverness before they arrive in the area, you know, so that they're not putting any money into the local economy, and they don't necessarily clear up their rubbish. And, you know, these are the ones who are impacting in a more negative way. So this is just something to think about on the flip side of how digital platforms can impact on such a rural area. So if we just move on, I think I might be at time now. If we move to the next slide. Yeah, the next steps are just to do some more workshops looking at future scenarios, digital storytelling, and we also have some future projects in the pipeline to continue our efforts in this area. And I think that's it from me. If we just move to the last slide. Yeah, anyone, I look forward to the Q&A discussion, but anyone who wants to contact me, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. So thanks again. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much, Leanne. A very interesting talk. I like it very much, especially that I was not involved in these project activities, and for me it's also interesting another example of working with social innovations. We have some questions already in question answer. So would you like me to read these questions?
Sure, yeah.
You can read them. You can see them.
Let me just look in the Q&A. Okay, so this question is to both presenters, so I could answer it and then Maria. And it's, how did you choose the rural areas to be included as cases in your project? What are the prospects of the two projects? Will they be multiplied in other places? So in the case of DESIRA, we'd already, I told you about the AgriLink project, where we found this really interesting sort of finding about farm size, and then started to look more deeply at what this would mean for small farms. So there, I started to develop an interest in small farms and whether or not technology was actually relevant to them. But when you think about small farms, you necessarily start to think more widely about that rural community, which goes back to some research I had done previously. And so a natural type of small farm to consider in Scotland is crofting. And the crofts are located on the west coast, typically, or the Highlands and Islands region of Scotland. So that's how we came to working in that area. Did I fully answer? Let me just see. what are the prospects of the projects? So, as I said, we're hoping to develop, to continue to develop those networks and that research through the DESIRA project, and also through further funding, which projects which perhaps look more to impact. We also provide activities back to the community. So, start my video, sorry, of course. So one example of what we can do to give back to the community is one theme that's been uncovered as important to people there is new entrants to crofting. So what they really need is young people to come and live in the community and to start a croft of their own. And there is some support available for that, but it's about getting the right people together in the room. There is a project called Newbie, and one of our colleagues at the Hutton called Annie will be hopefully facilitating a meeting between the different stakeholders to try and get things going again, and to try and support the development of these new crofts for people who are interested in moving to those areas. So that's one example of the kinds of things we hope to give back.
Yeah.
Maria,
maybe
yes,
I
please.
can add maybe in the Simra project, we also were based in the the selection of case studies was based on our previous knowledge. Of course, the consortium was very strong with 26 partners from 16 countries, and really very diverse disciplines, and working on issues associated with institutions, with social cohesion, and social innovation was a really new topic, but we were aware what's going on. But we also, of course, utilized the expert opinion survey. We had a scientific advisory board, and we had a stakeholder advisory board in our project, and we worked with local people. But what is also very important that, for instance, I live in Scotland. I know the area, yes, and of course, living in a remote area, and we are from a remote area, quite remote. The remote area is very close to us, so it's easier to work with stakeholders there than if we lived in the center of London or elsewhere. So, and the consortium was also structured in the way that all the consortium members, one way or another, came from marginalized rural areas, and it was very helpful for the selection of case studies. And for the second question, what are the prospects of the two projects? Of course, from the normative point of view, the network still exists. The developed ideas are implemented further in the networks that we remained, but also in new projects. The AgriLink project has already been mentioned. I'm also very partly marginally on it, but I'm more contributing to the Sherpa project. Also Horizon 2020, Horizon 2020 fire risk project, slightly different, with a main aim on tackling fire risk and prevention of fire risk, and getting people ready to fight against fire risk. But anyway, social innovation ideas like volunteer firefighters, especially developed type of social innovations in the Mediterranean area, in Spain, in Catalonia in particular. So this is the legacy, but from theoretical, so to say, conceptual point of view, of course, the legacy left behind is comprised of the changes of knowledge, advanced awareness, attitudes, and people's perceptions on the ground, how they perceive, how they learn that's what left behind. And we built capacities because we had 7 innovation action. It means that we worked with people not only by observing and kind of developing science as more in case studies, but innovation actions. So the people there really did something on the ground for their own benefit. So this is what has been left behind. And of course, knowledge exchange, exchange of experiences. This is also with respect of how you vision of development. That's what is there after the Simra has come to its end. Very successful project, by the way. But also we influenced policies. I think it's very important. So policies, it's very important for policies to be helpful and supportive for communities. So policies should be diverse, they should be bottom up and more encouraging participation and encouraging governance to be inclusive. They also need to break isolation and to manage rural, urban interaction and agricultural and forestry, for instance, so vertical collaboration and horizontal collaboration, I mean, going across scales. And we influence policies to be future ready. Leanne told about digitalization, but it also about what is this talk, or this session is today about low carbon future and about sustainability transformation. So I think also various partnerships have been created, and now we are applying to the Horizon Europe with a new project, yeah, involving Leanne and myself. So we will use the knowledge and everything, but we will go, of course, beyond the state of the art, beyond what's been done by Simra, DESIRA, and other current projects we are on. Yeah, thank you. That's everything from me.
Yeah, there's another question, I think, is about digitalization. Shall I go ahead? From Yves, sorry if I pronounce it wrong.
Yes, digitalization. I mean, yes, this question is also, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So,
excuse me, I just want to encourage the participants to post the questions in chat, and in the networking section, which will follow after this, on 12:30, we can have a direct communication and discussion, but you will get a link to this session soon. But for the moment, we can communicate via chat. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. So, so the question was that I was wondering if there were any examples of when not digitalizing was the best solution for a community or a group of actors with respect to their ideals and vision of development. So, yeah, that's a really important question, because we came to this project and other projects, of course, about digitalization, knowing that we have to respect that digitalization doesn't hold the same, not everybody has the same values around it. And some people are actually, they want to get on with their work without being very digital. So I can give a few different examples. I think in most cases, people are digital to some degree. And, with the small farms and the crofters, we probably find that the most impactful kind of digitalization is just the use of existing online platforms, or, they've adapted online platforms like the Green Bowl, or like using things like Facebook groups, Instagram to promote their products, just really simple things that we wouldn't think of being that like digital innovations anymore, but to them have been transformative since they've been able to access the internet. So that's a lower level so maybe it's about the scale. In terms of groups where digitalizing isn't appropriate, then of course, when it comes to your classic agri-tech, like large scale, precision farming on a huge tractor, then of course it's not currently appropriate for small farms at all. Although, we're also doing another project called Small Smart Farms, a much smaller project where we work with crofters to develop small prototypes of just little innovations that can help them. Like, being able to take a photograph of a group of sheep, and that camera can count the sheep. That doesn't sound very advanced, but actually nobody can count a big bunch of sheep by eye, and they need to know, did they get all their sheep from the hill? Is there another sheep up on the hill that is sick? So just little things like that can be really transformative. And there's just not enough being done to explore in a participatory way with these groups or communities. So that's where research can come in, I think. But yeah, there are also some small farms who just want to follow very traditional methods. They're not interested in digital innovations, but they may still use digital platforms in their everyday lives, just to connect with family or connect to what's going on. Hopefully that answers the question enough.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. We have one more question, which is from Natalia, who is providing the support for this session, and she has no rights to pose a question in question answer time. So I may read it, and Natalia can I think you can make a camera, available at least. The question is, how much were you able to use the DigiCroft tool you talk about for education and public consultation purposes, given you also talk about a low level of digital skills among the community? So that's the question for Leanne.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So that's the kind of the tension that we face. We're not at the stage yet where it's ready to be providing and promoting those services or those resources, but the first problem is access. So some people have lower levels of access. So it's there's a beautiful village hall. You saw a photograph in that last slide. That was us doing a socially distanced workshop in May. And that was built from a few years ago from lottery funding. So it's a really beautiful hall with a doctor's surgery inside and all kinds of things. And it has really good internet access in the hall. So local people are welcome to go there, sit in a comfy chair and access the internet there with a device, a laptop, a phone, whatever. In terms of the problems of digital skills, then our intention is, again, to pull people together in the hall with a workshop and to try and help people so that they actually get a bit of a head start with how do you access the platform, how do you navigate. You can do that either on a laptop, just moving around, with the mouse, or you can use the headset. So there's a very expensive virtual reality headset, that we can travel around and show people. But there's also a small cardboard box which you put over your smartphone and that we can give out to local people. We can give them that so that they can have the virtual reality experience, which is quite good fun, seeing people try that for the first time. Hopefully that's answered your question, but we'll tackle challenges and we'll see what comes.
Yep. Thank you very much. We look if there is any more question in between. I may ask something or to post something for the communication and discussion. You both are talking about the type of models or factors that are supporting well-being and in rural development. And so I would wonder, what are these factors that can support transformation to green recovery and low carbon? What do you think that from point of view of social innovation and digitalization, what are these key aspects that can really foster this well-being and rural development?
Maria, do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So actually, everything what been told about enabling conditions and factors of social innovation and about tackling barriers that exist applies to any kind of type of social innovation, but social innovation is indeed very context and case specific. With regard to green recovery, of course, these challenges and threats can be a trigger, actually. And in my presentation, I tried to show that these turbulent times and with the COVID especially, this COVID pandemic has brought our attention to the importance of green solutions, to the importance of nature-based solutions, and to consideration that we are one system, social and ecological system. But anything that concerns all the theory that has been developed, for instance, by Simra, the importance of actors, the importance of their cooperation, their motivation, the need of money, seed money, and then further on some funding to keep going is very important. It's very important, of course, to have clear idea what is needed, and of course all the constraints and barriers that could exist from property rights or from not supportive policy or governance structures would influence also social initiatives that concern Green Deal, green recovery and solutions, social innovation solutions with regard to using nature. Very important, I think, this consideration of upscaling. So for social innovation to last longer or to develop further or to develop elsewhere, and again to tackle all the barriers like volunteers can be simply tired or burnt out of their ideas. There should be new ideas coming up. There should be some plan of what to do. Everything that I have tried to focus on, it concerns also social and environmental interactions and the greening of economy, and also carbon neutrality. So via using bio economy projects and also renewable projects, circular bioeconomy ideas. So will help to target the objectives put forward by the Green Deal, also in a wider international sense by the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Leanne?
Yeah, so from the perspective of digitalization, then, I suppose if you think about the example of the Green Bowl, these kinds of initiatives, I think, can support green recovery, and also it's relevant for carbon and climate too. So all people in that community would have had to travel for at least 1 hour to buy food, really, before this initiative. They may have had contacts with one another to exchange a few vegetables or something like this. But now this initiative is expanded to include a bit of a kind of farm shop within the cafe as well. They can buy more and more of their products right there and not have to drive. You know, not every member of the or every household having to drive to Ullapool, which is the nearest town, once a week for the small Tesco, or even Inverness, which is even further for a bigger supermarket. So initiatives like that, digital initiatives that can create less travel, are obviously good. As we know, as we've all seen through this pandemic, you know, we've done so much more online. And I'm sure that if things return to what we think of as normal, there probably will be less travel now, even for us, you know. There'll still be conferences in person, consortium meetings in person, but there's going to be the more kind of regular steering meetings and things quite often, I think, will be online now, because it just makes more sense. So that's, you know, that's relevant at a local level for this community as well. And then on the flip side of that, I talked about the NC 500 route and all of the new tourists that have arrived in the area in camper vans, in caravans. So I probably should have mentioned, but obviously a lot of those caravans and camper vans are just parking up on the side of the road. It's this fashion for what they call wild camping. You want to have no other caravans around. You want to have a view out to the sea or of a mountain. And they're not paying for any accommodation costs. They're not contributing to the local economy. But probably the most important thing here is that those digital platforms that have popularized that kind of holiday and that location, which admittedly it's very beautiful, and why wouldn't you want to go and be there? But now the roads have more cars, more camper vans, more caravans than they can cope with. And of course, that's creating more transport and all of the environmental impacts of that. So I'm not sure what the playoff of, you know, there are less people on airplanes. I'm no expert on that. So yeah, it's a couple of examples anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very interesting and nice response. I think we have no additional questions in question and answer. So I like to ask you, the both panelists, if there is any final word that you would like to pose at this moment. We have a few minutes left. And so I can ask you both, Maria.
Final words. Thank you again for inviting us. And I hope also during the discussion we can listen to others and we can enlarge our common pool of knowledge and share it wider, upscale and outscale. Thank you very much, Tatiana, also personally.
Okay.
Yeah, just to echo what Maria said, thank you so much for inviting us. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussion too. And maybe next time, you know, despite the advantages of digital, maybe next time we see each other in person.
Okay, yes, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the both panelists for very interesting talks. And also this is topic, I think, which has a future, and especially combination of social and digital innovations is also was very much in COVID, or has been in COVID pandemic area, very much highlighted that this is something that is very much needed for development and for cohesion in rural areas. I like to encourage all the participants to use the link, which is already now in chat, and to connect to the next session, which will follow right now in few minutes, where we can have a direct communication, and we would be very much pleased to listen to others also what they think about the topic. So that's for me. So I mean, I think we may start to now to log into the new session, and hope to see you all there. Thank you very much for this excellent session.